I think we're good. I think we're live. Hello everyone, and welcome to the third Inclusive Insights of 2026, the last one of January, and the last one before we go back to our one-a-month format. Quick note before we begin: if you do need captions, you can switch them on platform settings. In Teams, if you go to the three dot switch, there's more towards the top right-hand side of the page. You should be able to go down to the language options there and turn them on should you need to. Cameras on is always welcome, but it's not a requirement. It's lovely to be able to see your faces as we engage, but not essential, especially if you've kind of had a rough night with kids in the background, however that may look. We want to make this nice and easy for you. We will have a few pauses throughout today's session for questions and reflections. So if something does come up during the session, please feel free to pop it in the chat as we go. And I will be keeping an eye on the chat as well. I will capture the questions, and when we reach the Q&A, if they haven't been answered, I will make sure they're either covered in the Q&A, or if we don't have time, unfortunately, then keep an eye on my socials and Joe's socials, and we might do a few follow-up blogs on things like that. Feel free to take notes, however works best for you, whether that's a pen and paper or your favorite note-taking app. And as I say, please do use the chat throughout. We love seeing your thoughts and reflections as we go. Before we go into the session, it'd be lovely to see who's in the room. So you might have seen the prompt in chat. If you could pop in your name, where you're joining from today. It's always interesting to see who's joining from furthest afield, what you do, and the organisation you're with, if indeed you're with an organisation. No obligations there. You could be a freelancer, and this might be your first introduction to trauma-informed design. However that looks like for you, it'd be fantastic to hear from you. I will give you a moment to do that. And if you would rather join quietly as well, you don't want to let us know who you are or pop in the chat, that's fine. There's no pressure to share more than you are comfortable with. For anyone new to these sessions, my name is Mike Osborne, and I'm the founder and CEO of Accessible Me. Thank you for being part of this session. And as I say, from next month, we'll be going back to our one-a-month format. Looking at the chat, I can see people joining already. So we got hello to Rachel, to Joe, to Benny, another Rachel. From different areas, we've got people from Birmingham, Surrey, from Germany. So I think that's taking the furthest so far. Scotland, Australia. That's going to be a difficult one to beat from Viv. But so as you'll see, this is a great mix of people here. Some of you may have deep experience, some might be starting out, and this is a safe space for all of you, or at least what we aspire to create. We're all here today to basically learn together, to be curious, and this is meant to be a practical space rather than a kind of a judgmental one. A quick word on Accessible Me. Our mission is simple. We want to remove the barriers that stop people from learning, from working, and living their lives fully. And we believe that starts by designing access from the very beginning. So some of you may have joined last week's webinar on what is trauma-informed design, and I'm very excited to be welcoming Jo in a moment, and which, with that in mind, does timely bring me to today's speakers. So I'm really thrilled to be welcoming Jo Levy. I hope I've not mispronounced that at all. Jo is a senior product manager and content designer at Chayn, which is a global non-profit supporting survivors for gender-based violence. Jo brings over 25 years of experience in content strategy, writing, design, and her sweet spot is creating digital products that generally support people in vulnerable situations. Right now, Jo's working on trauma-informed design at Chayn, including a project which we will be exploring today, the Modular Guides Toolkit. It's a brilliant example of how we can design frameworks that present complex information in a way that feels kind of accessible, empowering, and actually supportive for the people who need it most. So with that in mind, I'm going to shut up until the Q&A, and Jo, over to you.
Thank you. Right, okay, let me share a relevant window. Has that worked? Do you need to unshare first?
No, that has worked indeed. I can see the screen, but please do raise your hand if you can. I'm seeing some thumbs up from people, so I think you're good to go, Jo.
Okay, awesome. I think I'm just not seeing. I don't know why I'm not seeing it, but as long as everybody else is, that's the main thing, to be honest. So that works. Okay. All right, so yes, I'm Jo. I'm really excited to tell you all about this project that I've been working on for a few months now. So let's get into it. I'm just going to give you some background before we kind of get into the meat, if you like. So as Mike mentioned, Chayn is a global nonprofit supporting survivors of gender-based violence through trauma-informed resources, events, and training. They wanted a set of templates that they could use to adapt existing guides. They have a lot of online guides, and for writing future ones. Everything needed to be designed mobile first, because that's what most of their audience uses, as is the case for lots and lots of products now. And they wanted to move all the guides to their main site because they're all in disparate places. So the build had to be feasible in Webflow, which is what they use. The templates would also need to honor Chayn's trauma-informed design principles. Chayn have developed these principles specifically for their own audience and work, but you can see how they could apply outside of Chayn. You can see it overlaps with other trauma-informed design principles. So there's our safety, agency, equity, privacy, accountability, plurality, power sharing, and hope. And I think that we leaned into almost all of them, if not all of them, on this project, which was really good to do. So the challenge. Chayn has a very small team and very limited resources. Up until 2020, it was run entirely by volunteers. And even now, it just has a few paid staff. So because of this, their guides live on multiple platforms, for instance, within different products, on a dedicated URL, hosted on Gitbooks. They've been created by a variety of team members, volunteers, and partners, so the writing and formats differ wildly. The guides are hard to navigate and maintain, and accessibility is an issue as well. Yeah, this is basically a content designer's nightmare. So the key goals, they had some specific goals for the project. For the sort of two parts of the equation, for survivors, they wanted the guides to be consistent and easy to navigate, so relevant information could be found quickly. They wanted them to be trauma-informed and accessible, particularly for neurodivergent survivors and those for whom English is a second language, since Chayn's audience is global. And they essentially wanted a calmer, safer, more empowering experience. For the team, the guides needed to be easy to create, update, and maintain, have clearly documented, scalable processes and guidelines so that they didn't need a content designer to create them every single time. So this is a short version of what I proposed. The brief was to create a set of 3 to 5 templates, but actually I kind of quickly could see that that wasn't going to do the job. It wouldn't offer enough flexibility for either the existing content or any new content to come. So I recommended a modular system that would be flexible and adaptable, with optional components to suit different types of information, and a consistent framework with trauma-informed principles embedded into the experience. This is the big old caveat. This project is still evolving. We are still working on it. There are parts of the framework that are being changed as we speak. It is by no means perfect. I'm also still working on creating the full guidelines, documenting the processes. But if you want to see where we're at right now, you can scan this QR code and go to our flagship online safety guide, which is the first one designed and built in the new framework. And we will be launching other ones soon and launching guides in other languages as well. Okay, so just one more thing before we get into the nitty-gritty, a quick primer, because there are 3 disciplines involved here. So just in case you're not sure of the definitions, this is how I think of them. Content design is about the words and information you give people and the structure you apply to it so people can find, understand, and use what they need. UX design is about the experience, interactions, and journey for the user. It's how it all feels and functions. UI design is about the visual interface, how everything looks, the layouts, the color palette, buttons, typography, everything about the visuals, and so on. All three disciplines were in play on this project, and they have huge overlaps, especially when it comes to language and tone. So that means, you can't design a good interface without knowing what words go into it, or at least that's what I think. I have met designers who don't seem to agree, but let's just say best practice. You can't write good content without understanding the user journey, and you can't create a good user experience without having the right words and the right visual presentation. Okay, so now for the good stuff. We had 4 main challenges for the project, or at least 4 that I'm going to talk about today. And the first one was that we needed to design for multifaceted, complex experiences of survivors. So the problem is that there is no single issue human, so you can't assume a one-size-fits-all approach. That's part of Chayn's principle on plurality. Survivors are not a monolith. So that means we need to provide information to cover a range of situations, and not all of those are going to be relevant for each individual survivor. So that means we also need to help users easily find what they need. And in addition, people don't all process information in a linear way. They don't all start at the very beginning and read right the way through to the end. So you have to allow them multiple entry points. So, quiz time. How would you handle this situation? Would you A, create a set of survivor personas to design around? B, offer different navigation options? C, put content in a logical sequence for users to read, beginning to end? D, add buttons after each section asking where users want to go next? And yes, some of this is just seeing if you've been paying attention. So votes in the chat. Thank you, Etty. Yes. Votes in the chat. Which option do you think is the correct answer? Interesting responses.
Indeed, D is looking quite strong, I think closely followed by B, but A, there's a couple of A's in there as well.
Yeah. So I'm going to emphasize that nothing that I say in this presentation is the only answer or the correct answer. It's just this is what we did. So for me, it's offering different navigation options. Yes, you could do buttons after each section, asking where they want to go next, but I think that involves so much personalization and tailoring. It's a kind of a choose your own adventure, and it just gets too complex to manage to scale. So the personas, I think, are not necessarily helpful because you're kind of looking at a flattened idea of what a survivor is. So offering different navigation options is where we wanted to go. And let me tell you more about that. So that meant using a modular structure that makes it easy for people to look at the guide outline and immediately see what parts are relevant for them. Clear navigation, that helps signpost the way to that content. And for us, we also wanted to adopt a take what you need approach. So survivors can cherry pick what they want without feeling like they had to, read the whole thing. So this is where I'm actually kind of showing you what it looked like. And depending on the size of your screen, you may or may not be able to actually read the text on here, but these screenshots are taken from the online safety guide, so you can have a closer look at there. You can hopefully see how we split up different concerns around online safety into separate sections using clear language so users could quickly see what they need. So, someone targeted me for a scam, someone is harassing me online, someone has my personal images, these things, immediately you can say, yes, that's me, or that's not what I'm looking for. And in the online safety guide, yes, we've done that, and that's based around different types of digital abuse. But in other guides, it might be different stages of the journey. It might be different options for handling a situation. So the kind of important thing is to use clear language to identify each of these sections to help people figure out where they want to go. And so on the right here, you can see sort of like some of the navigation examples. On the right, there's the original mobile designs, which featured at the top of the screen, just behind the quick exit button. It's got in this guide, and you could tap that to get an expanding panel down, and you could expand each of the contents. But actually, in user feedback, it became clear that people didn't even see that. They just didn't notice it at all. So they didn't know how they were supposed to navigate on mobile, which is just one of those hilarious things that you wouldn't even anticipate. So on the left of the screen is what we actually have now, where we kind of redesigned to create like a sticky app style nav bar at the bottom. And then the contents list expands up the way. And again, you can expand each section and then click the little cross to make it go away. We also wanted to reassure survivors at various points that they're in the right place, or to clarify for them that they weren't. So one of the main things we did was add a carousel. This is what you're seeing on the left-hand side, into the intro section. What do you need right now? That it just allows users to jump straight into the section that matches their concern. And for the online safety guide, that was really easy. We were naming the sections in the same way as the thought that might be going through the survivor's head. We'll need to see if we have to adapt the language or how that works with other guides going forwards. But the idea is to give people a jumping off point straight into the thing that's relevant for them. But the other thing that user feedback showed was that this carousel, although kind of pretty, gets missed. People didn't necessarily notice it was there. It may be something to do with where it is actually positioned in the whole intro section. So we're also kind of working on stuff with that, and maybe looking at the design there. So we also included some consistent copy sections that would obviously get adapted for each guide. On the mobile screens there, the one on the left is on our cover every time, you're in the right place if. And then we have a version of that at the start of every section to just show survivors that we recognize their experience, how they might be feeling, that is all okay. And again, it helps them if that doesn't match them, then it might be a different section that they're looking for. So what's the quick soundbite that you can take from this? Well, for me, it's that you design for moments on the journey and not personas. And that may change. That may be not the case depending on your product, your app, your audience. But certainly here for survivors, for trauma-informed design, you've got people at a number of different stages. You've got people in a number of different emotional states. So you want to try and meet them where they are and give them multiple options for getting to what they want. So do we have any questions so far, Mike?
There are some questions. They may not necessarily be specific on this, but there's an example, of somebody being intrigued by carousels, so being able to use them more, but often having some accessibility issues. So I think I don't know if that's something you've covered across. If not, it's something we can come back to later in the session. But we can give it a couple of moments just to see if any comes through in the chat. So please do pop them there if indeed you have any. But yeah, not so far.
Thanks, Marion. That's actually, I mean, I'm learning all the time, so that's not something that I realised. I need to look into that. I guess at least there are always multiple ways to get to different parts of the content, so that I'm trying to think. There may be other places where we might use what I was trying to think was, are there places where we use carousels and we don't offer an alternative? And I'm not sure. So I will definitely take that away and have a think about it. Because I suppose part of it is for us is wanting to kind of, it's part of something I'm going to talk about in a little bit, but progressive disclosure and not showing too much information at once. But yeah, if there's accessibility issues, then that's obviously a different problem. Okay, all right, so will we move on? I'm going to take that as a yes. Fantastic, right, so the next challenge, how to support survivors without overwhelming them. And the problem here is that you're trying to consider all the different types of information that a guide might cover. And these types of information are sometimes complex, sometimes technical, sometimes emotional, and that can be scary, yes, complex again, and overwhelming. And it could even potentially trigger fight or flight responses. Survivors who are still experiencing or recovering from abuse can be in distress and still need to come to you to find information or answers to their questions, but that can make it much more difficult for them to process information. So the next quiz, how would you deal with this particular challenge? A, use clear supportive language. B, present information in bite-sized chunks. C, provide a glossary of potentially unfamiliar terms. D, all of the above. Go. Okay, that's pretty good. That's fairly overwhelming there. Yes, excellent. So yes, exactly. Of course it was all of the above. And this is how we did it. So tone is everything. It always is with Chayn. So we were careful to use trauma-informed, supportive language. We also made sure that language was clear to minimize overwhelm, and we chunked information into bite-sized pieces because that also helps to contribute to that. Rather than have a separate glossary, we actually adapted tooltips into glossary explanations that could be viewed on the page so that users don't have to break their reading to go to a different page and then maybe come back just to understand a particular term. And we made the decision not to include an estimated reading time because it can add pressure and make users feel bad if they don't meet it. And a lot of our guides are not being consumed all in one go anyway, so you know it's not even clear how useful it would be, even if the other things weren't an issue. So hopefully you can see, again, you may not be able to read all the copy, but these are a couple of examples of the kind of language that we use in the guides, recognizing what survivors might be feeling and making it okay. You know, being targeted is never our fault. It's not your fault. Basically, like, it's common for us to feel embarrassed or blame ourselves, but that's because of this. So it just provides reassurance and emphasizes that users deserve care instead. For me, chunking, probably for anybody else, chunking information kind of looks like this, breaking the page up into sections with headers, using bullets, keeping paragraphs short. And I also introduced a key takeaways feature at the end of every section, and then a kind of overview one at the end of the whole guide, to repeat the most important elements, which kind of helps with cognitive load as well, and just as a recap for yeah, the most important things that you want survivors to remember. if you visit the live online safety guide, then you'll be able to see the glossary tooltips in action. But on these screens, hopefully this will give you an idea. You may be able to see we underline glossary terms with a dotted underline, whereas for links it's a solid underline. And then when you tap on mobile or you click on desktop, you get a pop-up that gives a brief explanation and includes an external link if that's relevant. We're actually working on ways to make that clearer when it's external, just so that users know that they would be going away from the guide or they're going to non-Chayn content. And we've also been looking at some little functionality bits that are kind of currently clashing a little. Like there's a weird thing in accordions. If there's a tooltip in an accordion, that closing the tooltip window also collapses the accordion, which is annoying if you were still reading that bit of the copy, but our tech team are on it. Okay, so the takeaway here is how you say it is just as important as what you say. And that doesn't just apply to the words you use, but it's also how you structure the information and how, when, and where you display it. So any other questions at this point?
I've seen a bit of discussion. I think you've definitely raised something with the carousels element. There are some questions around that. But again, if anybody's have any questions, please do pop them in the chat. Here's one from Gemma. Have you encountered any accessibility issues with tooltips?
So not so far. We often have to kind of like test on the fly. Like the team isn't big enough to be able to do all the proper testing before you launch, so it's tough launched and then you're still iterating on it and trying it. And we also have some limitations with what we can use because it's Webflow. I believe that the tooltips kind of component that we adapted had kind of accessibility features in, but I would need to double check actually.
Do you have another question if there's time? If you need to move on, we can come back.
I think we might be okay, maybe, probably.
Okay, so there's a question coming in from Etty, which is who is in your testing pool? They would love to know a bit about who's testing the content.
So again, small team, but we have our kind of core paid team, and then there's also volunteers, and we're actually about to launch a new volunteers program. So we've had a lot of applications coming in for kind of new people wanting to work with this. So we put it out to the team, and there are kind of different levels of testing that we can do as well. So we'll say that we haven't done intensive. We've kind of done almost like a top level, if you like. But the intensive session is something that we do want to do once we've got, I think, this round of iterations done that we're working on right now. So yes, so volunteers are quite often survivors, the people who've kind of had traumatic experiences, had experiences with gender-based violence, so they have lived experience. We also really try and make sure that in our team and in our volunteers that we've got diversity in terms of people from all over the world. People are from, the global south as well as the global north. Yeah, just people from all kinds of different backgrounds to kind of, pick up on, I guess, stuff that might land with one audience and not another. It's quite important to Chayn, and I think it's quite important in general to be inclusive of as many different types of people as you can, I guess.
Very much. And then I think whilst there's no more questions for now, in addition to the carousels, the other one that I think you started an interesting discussion in the chat is around that. Do we disclose, estimated reading times or not? So I think that some fantastic conversation going on there. I don't think that's necessarily a right or wrong answer, but so long as you can justify why you've made the decision, this is going to be fantastic.
I love these conversations. So yeah, I can't obviously do that as well. But I would be there if I wasn't presenting. And I would just like to see the chat transcript afterwards because I find all that stuff really interesting. Right. Okay. Shall we crack on?
Yeah, I believe crack on, and we can always pick up more questions towards the end if we have them.
Yes. Okay. So the next challenge was maybe the trickiest one to balance. Comprehensiveness against optimal cognitive load. So in content design, you always have to decide how much information to share, but it's particularly tricky with trauma-informed design. Too much can lead to overwhelm, too little can mean risky gaps in safety. And people with trauma experience are much more sensitive to cognitive load. So that affects their decision making, their thinking time, their emotional regulation. And of course, cognitive load can also be an issue for neurodivergent users, for other people with accessibility issues, for those with English as a second language as well. So, different quiz this time. You can either scan the QR code or the URL is that simple. Go to that. That is actually one of our most popular guides, and the information in it is great. But I want you to literally have a quick look. I do not want an audit. I would not expect an audit. Just a few seconds to quickly have a look at the page, and then post into the chat, what's the main issue here for cognitive load? This is where we have to wait for people to look at it. Sorry, great answers. Yeah. Okay. So, yes. Essentially, there's nothing inaccurate there. For me, the main problem is poor navigation. The total word count in this guide is just under 23,000 words. This is actually one of the guides that I audited during the discovery phase, and it just blew my mind. Because there is some really fantastic content in there, but my gosh, you have to work for it. All 23,000 words are on one page, but the biggest section of that, just under 20,000 words, is really the meat of the guide, what manipulation looks like. And there is no navigation at all within that section. You've got the hamburger menu at the top to help you jump to different sections, but you can just jump to the start of that, or obviously the end of it with the next section, which just means that you have to wade through all of that to find the bit of manipulation that matches your experience. And yes, as you have commented, the page is dauntingly long. These screenshots were all that my phone will allow me to take. That's just over 3,000 words. So you can see that's like there's another 20,000 still to go that's not even there, which is just wild to me. And as lots of you have commented, walls of hard to read text, quite difficult to read. You've made some excellent points that were on there as well. So the average reading grade, and I like to use Hemingway for kind of like analyzing bits of text. So the average reading grade was 9. For our audience, neurodivergency, English as a second language, people undergoing trauma, we want to be aiming for a 7, 6 at the most. And it also tagged that 35% of all sentences were very hard to read. If you like Hemingway's color coding, there's just so much red. So what we did, I devised a consistent bookended structure so that users would see a familiar intro and outro for each guide, and similarly for each section within that. For the online safety guide, we even have a consistent structure within every section, so that's the same structure each time. So users then, it helps them know what to expect and to make quick choices about what to focus on. We ensured a clear hierarchy on each page for easy skimming and SEO hygiene. So proper text formatting, header hierarchy, correct paragraphs, not soft returns, as I found in a number of the guides, but actual bullets and not just fake bullets. That's not only good practice for SEO, so your content is easier to find, but it's also best for using screen readers and other assistive technologies. So we want an accessible reading level of 6 to 7, and we're obviously looking to avoid slang, idioms, cultural references. And here's a funny story. We got that bit wrong with the guide's title, which may still be on it. We're in the process of removing it. Basically, DIY is not a term that works across languages or cultures. It means something to us over in the West. It's not a term that they use in other places. So we were doing an update to a previous guide. It was all new information, but the previous guide was called DIY, and it's just like we didn't question it, which is just kind of funny how your brain defaults and the assumptions that you don't even realize you're making. So yes, so now we are changing it so that it will read online safety guide, and that's how I'm trying to talk about it. So also progressive disclosure via content components like accordions and tabs, and color-coded callouts for quick recognition. So I'm going to whip through these quite quickly, but you can also see them in action in your online safety guide. This is where I was working out the flow for there was the wireframes for how you would move through the introduction from your cover, from what the guide is about, how you can use it, to kind of emotional safety, and then what do you need right now. And actually, originally I had thought each of these would be on separate pages. That turned out to not be possible with Webflow, with our subscription. And we also have been restructuring how the cover and the intro work together. So those changes will be kind of published soon, but this is all part of the thinking process. Similarly, over here, you've got your consistent introduction and a summary that bookend the content in each section. And then at the end, we've also got certain things that would be then common consistent in each guide. So for users who get to know us and who read more than one guide, they quickly kind of learn the navigation and learn what to expect. And that helps with helping people to feel safer and more secure in the experience. So live, this is kind of what this looks like on desktop in the main introduction, what the guide is about, and at the end, you've got before you go, and as I mentioned, the key takeaways, part of that we'll have at the end of every guide. And for the online safety guide, you can see that exactly the same structure each time, so that we sort of moved through stages of understanding from, I guess, the more theoretical, so understanding what you're looking at, how it might affect you. The impact of AI is obviously a big thing for anything about tech, about digital. You're not alone if you're thinking. There's a whole thing about basically common survivor concerns and fears. It's again about letting people know that they were seen, that we understood the experience, and that this is normal. And then things that we can do, practical steps, further steps, which is kind of like taking that on another stage, and a summary for each section. I kind of had in Figma worked out my type styles. Chayn's website, because it has been worked on by different people over a number of years, is not the most consistent typographically. But yeah, ensuring that we're using proper heading hierarchy, so that pages are easy to navigate. And progressive disclosure, like I mentioned, using things like accordions, using tabs, so that people can tap on the bit that they need to see. They might not need to read all that information. So one of the considerations that I'd mentioned with using these is that some people, you can get users who will miss what's in them. So for instance, when you're using either of these, each of the items should be of equal importance. You don't want to have it so that the one thing is more important, because they might miss the other things. And then my pretty color-coded call-outs that actually in the course of this conversation makes me think, oh yeah, actually for screen readers and stuff, people who can't see this, I want to make sure that we've built something in that explains, so that, for instance, for a content warning, it's always blue. But then I guess if it's reading out the title for that, then that works. They don't need to know what color it is. But yeah, the idea was that particularly for neurodivergent users and people where the visual side of things helps with navigation, that this would be useful. Okay, so takeaway tip here is that consistency is your friend for reducing cognitive load. Consistent structures, formats, formatting, all of that makes it easier for people to process information quickly. So any questions before we move on to the last challenge?
So there's one I've seen on what is meant by bookended structure. Now I have put a definition in the chat, but if you want to give your own definition by what you meant by that, just so we're not making assumptions.
So I guess yeah, it's a consistent beginning and a consistent end that serves as bookends to the main content, if you like. And the reason for that is, with so many different types of content, so many different, it kind of feels impossible to even legislate for what other things Chayn guides might cover in the future, let alone what they're covering now. So you are going to get a lot of different types of information. And this is one way that you can create familiarity and consistency and a kind of feeling of stability, is by running this so that at the beginning of the guide, you always have, you adapt the copy, obviously, but the structure and what the headings, if you like, are the same. And then for each section, it's a kind of that presentation technique, like tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And that helps for retention as well. Sorry, I'm just noticing Vicky's
Question on
comment.
colours.
But I hope that helps with the bookend. So the different colours, yes, it is quite a lot of different colours, but you would never see them all together. They would not appear on the page. It's kind of having a suite so that these elements can be picked at different times. And for instance, the key takeaways is probably the one that you would see the most. And so that visually, when you see that green, you don't even need to read the title. Once you get used to how the guide works, you know, there's your key takeaways. So yeah, I would not advocate using that many at once.
Another thing you can do for using colours as well is to pair them with icons and stuff like that, just to increase that comprehension, so that colour isn't the only differentiator.
Which I have done as well. There's a little icon, which you probably won't be able to see on this side of the screen, but there's a little icon in the top right for each one, so that it's actually something that I want to look at more, is other ways to build in icons and other visual devices within the body. At the moment, it's quite text and there's not many kind of visuals. I think we checked the cast, but there is a little symbol in there as well. And obviously for trauma informed, we want to make sure that we're keeping all our colours kind of soft.
Yes.
So Viv, I see your question. but I do want to make sure that we just get through the next section. The short answer is, off the top of my head, no. I've tried to be transparent and mention the things that were surprising in the feedback. But yeah, that'll maybe go at the back of my head, and I'll come back to you if anything occurs. Okay, so the last but not least, honouring privacy constraints. And this is what I mean by that. Chayn made the conscious decision to not gate Chayn.co content behind logins. So on the Chayn.co website, you cannot create an account. You don't have to create an account. Everything is just there, and it means it's more accessible for more people, especially if any of those people are worried about privacy, or maybe, you know, creating online accounts that could lead to emails when there's somebody watching their email inbox. On the flip side, progress tracking can be really helpful for users, especially when they might want to come back to the same guide multiple times. So the last quiz, what would you do? And again, I'm going to emphasize, I'm not saying this is the only correct answer, the thing that we did, but so A, show the current section number. Hey, balloons, I can never do that deliberately. Right, okay, sorry, I get distracted easily. A, show the current section number at the top of the page. B, show a percentage for how much the user has completed. C, show a bar with all the sections and the current section highlighted. D, tell users to take a note of where they get up to. And I like the question marks. I am enjoying this. Okay, so right. So our answer was this: to show a bar with all the sections, and which you, if you looked at the online safety guide, you'd be able to see what we did. So since we couldn't give users actual progress indicators, we did what we felt was the next best thing. We made their location really clear, sort of like a "you are here" marker. And we did this via a bar of section numbers that could also be used to jump between those sections. You can't rely on a browser remembering Aggie, sorry. For instance, mine does sometimes, doesn't other times. If you have closed out the tab by accident, it won't remember when you go back to it. If you're using somebody else's browser, if you're using different devices. So yeah, I just think you can't kind of rely on that. And this is kind of how this looks. So on the left, you can see the location bar across the top of the page, and also it gets reflected in the contents pop-up list. And then on desktop, you'll have seen this in this guide panel. It's a sticky panel that's there all the time, and that would highlight which one you're in, like even if you don't have those expanded. You may not be able to see this very well, but I did look at a number of different ways that we could show this when I was wireframing. So there are concepts that are sort of like visually look quite nice, but are less clear. So for instance, I've said that, you know, there's this one where it's separate little bars, but with no text. So it indicates place rather than completion. That's fine. But it's also similar to what we were doing for sort of like, or what people would expect to see for media carousels. And I'm not sure that users would know it was about progress. If you add some text, a section, that does help, but it looks more cluttered. And let's see, it's also not as clear, the total number of sections, without you having to count them. And let's see, over on the right-hand side, percentages can be difficult for some people to understand. And they definitely suggest progress rather than place. And obviously we want to be clear about, like, well, we're not actually showing you your progress, we're just showing you where you are. So you could change the label on that, use that same device and change the label to the section marker, but still you don't know the total number of sections. So that's why we ended up with what we did. So the final takeaway from me today is to think about what the user actually needs or wants to achieve. And for me, that's in line with the jobs to be done approach for product development. You think about the job the user needs to get done, and then you work out the best solution that you can offer from there. So this one isn't perfect. It's clearly never going to be an actual progress indicator, but I think the privacy concerns are more important, and so in that case, it's a decent trade-off. Okay, so any final questions?
I keep an eye on the chat, so do keep them coming if anyone does have final questions. I have been keeping an eye on them, so I guess there's one here from Viv. Did you learn anything else unexpected about inclusive language during this project?
Yeah, I saw that one just before we went into this section. So off the top of my head, and I have ADHD, so memory. Wow, that doesn't always work. So off the top of my head, I don't think so. I think I mentioned the sort of like the key things, but it's also like I've been working on this since last July, so you also kind of maybe forget some things that you encountered even in development, didn't even get to live, but you know, something came out and you're working as a team. Penny, yeah, with the examples that I showed with the different types, so I was just working in Figma, but it's a number of different platforms that I have used for wireframing, so we happen to use Figma here, but Miro is quite good actually. I like things where you can have components that you don't have to consistently recreate. So yeah, that works too.
There have been a couple of questions on the visual design and color use. So from Vicky and Neil, there's questions of how was the color scheme decided to support cognitive load? Were the color combinations checked for contrast compliance? And how does Chayn choose its color palette, especially for the softer tones? Now that may not be in your remit if that's been decided by a brand designer, but you know, yeah, I don't know if you got anywhere to that one.
Okay, so let me see. There's three parts to this. So for for color contrast, Figma has a nice little feature in it where it will check things for you and tell you if they are not working. So you're making me want to go back and double check what I did, but that was a concern, and I feel like I did take it into account. From a brand perspective, yes, Chayn has a color palette, but it's also all over the place, as can happen quite often with a small team and things that have been developed kind of over the years. So I know it's something that our head of comms really wants to try and make more consistent, to kind of make more flexible for us. So there were colors already in use on the website, but that they weren't all very pretty. They didn't, like, I've got a thing about when you're creating a suite of things with different colors, that you want them to look like they're part of a family, you know. So tonally they should look like they go together, and that wasn't the case with the existing colors. So I kind of checked with our tech team, and our lead designer was like, our lead engineer was like, it's fine, just do what you want and we'll implement it. So that was the brand side. Was there another piece to the cognitive load? So I feel like I covered that earlier, just that you'll never see all of those at once. The only people that will, with the ones creating the build and me designing it, but as a user, you would never see them all at once. You wouldn't even see all of them in any one guide, I don't think. I just wanted to make sure that I was covering for sort of all eventualities. And to be honest, the ones that you saw on my screen there, that's a screenshot from Figma. They haven't all been built. It's entirely possible that actually something that I thought we would use is not something that we would use. So,
and then there's one more theme which I'm seeing, which is on inclusive research and testing. So kind of two variations of this, but which are linked. So is there any guidance around seeking input from survivors? So especially in trauma-informed context, how do you gather feedback responsibly and ethically? And I think that links to another one from Vicky, which says, did you work with survivors when coming up with any of the optimal solutions here? So I think, yeah, any guidance you have around a trauma-informed approach to getting feedback from trauma, so the survivors of trauma, I suppose.
So we didn't directly work with survivors in the development of the framework. Survivors are involved in the early stage of feedback that we've done, and will be involved in our sort of more detailed user testing feedback as well. It feels like, it's not that it feels like, for Chayn it's really important to be respectful of survivors' time and their experience. We generally prefer to pay people for their time if they're doing user interviews, if they're helping us that way. So we didn't want to do really detailed user testing while we still knew that there was a whole load of these things that we wanted to deal with. Like, what's the point in getting people to wade through stuff that we already know is wrong? Which is why we're kind of getting through this round of the iterations, if that makes sense. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's a fully comprehensive answer, but maybe it's an answer for now. Certainly, like, we worked with our survivor services team, who have really close contact with lots of our audience, with our volunteers, and so we kind of got survivor feedback by proxy, if that makes sense. They work really closely. They're closely involved with survivors and have really extensive experience with that audience. So it was great to get their input.
I believe that's at least most of the questions, but certainly I think that it's been a very busy chat today, so we may well not have got through all of them, and certainly may not be able to get onto them within the time allows. Jo, I will share the full chat as well as the transcript with you, so of course we can work together on follow-ups. So everybody who is registered for the session, do check your emails and do make sure you are following us on the socials. That may be come across in terms of blog content. There may be short form videos from us. Not quite sure how that will look yet, but there'll definitely be some follow-ups on this. I do want to say for everyone who is dropping off, thank you everyone who has given up their lunchtime potentially if you're joining in the UK, over the last hour, and perhaps even more importantly, a big thank you to Jo for delivering such a fantastic session. I do not have a hard stop myself, so if you do have a couple of questions after 1 o'clock, I'm absolutely available. The recording of the session will be uploaded to our YouTube shortly, complete with closed captions as well. But Jo, before we wrap up, any final words from yourself?
No, my brain's gone now. I mean, I also don't have a hard stop. If anybody does have any like final questions prompted, I might come up with an answer, but nothing off the top of my head.
Okay, well, yeah, do stick around if you have any questions. We are dropping a couple of links in the chat, but don't feel rushed to take them. You can send them on social as well, and do find us on LinkedIn and on other socials. It'd be great to connect with both with you and make sure you have in each other as well. So I can always create a group chat if people are happy with that. I did that with the session last week, and yeah, I just want to say thank you everyone very much for your time today. We're looking at the call. We still have 43 people on the chat. That number may drop significantly soon, but I am going to keep an eye on the chat now just to see if there are any final questions. You do have a couple of minutes to talk you through any additional ones. The feedback is looking very strong though. Lots of thank yous, great sessions, and so I just want to say thank you again, Jo. The time you've given to putting this together, so to share your experiences has been massively helpful. I have seen a call to put your chat, your LinkedIn in the chat, so I'm just going to grab that one because I do have it to hand.
Ah, okay, perfect.
It's all in my document. You know, the
I
things I
need
have
an
ready to go.
autocomplete shortcut for my LinkedIn profile a number of times. But yes, please, everybody do feel free to come connect with me on LinkedIn.
So there you go. Put both Joe's LinkedIn and my LinkedIn in there. So it would be fantastic to hear from you. We are down to 18 and 16, so I think some of those may be AI note takers as well. But yeah, once again, if anyone, what I am going to do actually is if anyone does want to kind of have come off mute, I am going to change the settings just so you can do that. If I can actually find how to, to do that. Now, having said that, settings.
Is everybody waiting to see if anybody else is going to ask questions?
that does happen as well, actually. So
I actually, Abika, you did ask a question there. Where was that? Oh yeah, how you ensure my own mental stability. That's the story of my life. Oh, thank you, Rashid, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Thank you. How do I ensure my own mental health? Chayn's actually really conscious of well-being. So they have a lot of sort of like features in place for their team. In general, I have to say I'm not on the front lines with survivors. And I think that helps. I think it's much more difficult for our survivor services team. So I'm able to kind of like take a step away, and certainly it would maybe be different if I was consistently creating, adapting guides and working directly with the content. But when you're working on the framework, and particularly the flagship guide being online safety, yes, there's kind of difficult information in there, but I think it's maybe easier to kind of keep yourself a step back. But I'm also quite, a person who quite self-aware, and I guess I try and make sure to prioritize self-care, to do the things day to day that help me to self-regulate and kind of I guess like re-energize, like look after my energy, these kinds of things. With ADHD, I find that it's quite easy to keep going for too long and then potato for
yes.
a day or two. So I do try and keep an eye on
Hyper-focus days and potato days. I've learning the lingo, the more I kind of familiarize with my condition. Richard, forgive me if I've mispronounced your name. You've got a question on freelancing. You can either pop that into the chat, or I think I have enabled mics. So if you want to speak that one, you are entitled to, or free to do so. And if not, you can obviously get in touch on LinkedIn as well. Please don't feel you have to in an open forum. We want to make this as safe and as comfortable as you dare to comment on.
Yeah, exactly. It's all good. Anybody else see any other questions that I might have missed in the chat? So many nice comments. Thank you so much.
Okay, so Ruchit says, I'm starting my freelancing journey with just starting first time and have one YOE with internship. Okay, profile. So so if I've understood correctly, it's how can you start in this space? Do challenge me if I've misunderstood. Ultimately, one of the things I would say is there's an element of personal branches. If this is an area you want to focus on, want to major in, make sure your profile speaks to that. That this is the content I am writing about, so then people know when they land on your profile, these are the kind of things that are going to land in your comments, or in the chat. You can build a bit of a newsletter around that, and I think then it's just a case of research really. And there's no expectations certainly from myself that you'd be expected to be an expert. One of the things you can do is just be a couple of steps above where people are beyond. So, certainly when I started my journey in accessibility or accessible design, I didn't know everything there was. I knew lots on neurodivergence, which aligns to my own lived experience, but I have learned so much just by having conversations with people. So if I take questions around people who might be deaf or hard of hearing, how do deaf parents of children hear their baby cry, or how can they hear if the fire alarm is going, and actually just by having conversations with people, being not afraid to ask them questions, but trying to create a safe environment in which you can do that. Not calling everyone out in an open forum, but just maybe asking private, showing curiosity. I think is a fantastic one. Jo, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that, or more on a trauma-informed design rather than accessibility. Like, where did your journey start in this space? Or how did you come across it?
My career path's been really quite organic. Maybe that kind of fits with my sort of like ADHD. Oh, there's new shiny over here. Like, I find stuff that I'm interested in and I do that, and then I do more of it. I've not freelanced to a huge extent. I did start with Chayn freelance and then got a contract role, which is coming to an end at the end of March. So I don't know that I can give like great advice on freelancing, but I think your advice on getting yourself out there and kind of getting up to speed, I think particularly if you follow things that interest you, then you're going to be more passionate about it and you're going to be more compelling. And you and I, Mike, we only connected sort of like a little bit before Christmas. Honestly, the amount of stuff that I've already learned on accessibility that I didn't know before it's phenomenal. So highly recommend conversations. There's always something that you'll get from it that you didn't expect.
One thing I would add to that is to know what you want to achieve. So, if you want to help the beneficiaries, like the people who have been affected by trauma, that's a revenue. Another thing you might do is say, hey, I want to consult with organizations to help them make sure their content is trauma-informed design or has the accessibility considerations. Do you want to work in the charity sector? Do you want to work in corporate? Just having that kind of knowing where you want to be and the impact you want to have, you can then work backwards. So, if I set for the example of like, I want to reach positively impact a million people, then that's a massive order. But in order to do that, in doing webinars like this, if just 10% people go away and make 2 or 3 changes, the ripple effect is potentially huge. So I don't need to go away and track that. I know, and ultimately I use that not as a metric to say have I hit that or not, but am I broadly speaking moving in the right direction? And I think if that's the kind of thing you want to build a reputation for, then absolutely explore that route. Now we've got, hopefully I'm getting these right, so we've got Damilola, we've got Michelle, Ushit, and Swagata. Or Swagata, I'm not sure if that's a V or a W sound, depending on the language. You're all on mute at the moment, so I'm going to assume there are no questions, but if there are, please do get in touch following the session, and we can absolutely speak. But once again, Jo, thank you so much for your time today. You will get the transcript from the chat. What we've spoken around as well. So
Awesome.
I look forward to continuing our collaboration, and wishing you all the best as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed today. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for hosting.
All good. Any final words before I stop the recording?
No, all good. Everybody, hope you all have a great day.
Thanks. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.